Welcome back to our 5 Things series, where we talk about global living and investments and some practical tips on how we can help you along your journey. With Liberty, we offer simple, accessible global solutions, and we're really excited to have you back in our second season talking about practical issues around global investing. Today, we cover quite an interesting phenomenon, and that is called the swallow lifestyle. We've heard about global nomads, and it does spark some envy when you look on Instagram or you see friends traveling the globe, completely mobile, sometimes actually performing 1 or 2 or even up to 7 jobs, and really just traveling around the world. But there's a new trend on the rise, and that is looking at individuals that actually have 2 locations. They might be based in South Africa and somewhere else around the world, and they travel between these 2 locations at any point in time. In studio today, we've got Brandon Naidoo again. Welcome, Brandon. Really nice to have you. And we're going to talk about this phenomenon and what this actually means practically. And so over to you, Brandon. Talk to us about the swallow lifestyle. What exactly is it?
Thanks, Famida. Great to be back. The swallow lifestyle, or the snowbird lifestyle, as our American friends like to call it, essentially started with retirees looking for a warmer climate. So I would live one part of the year in place X, and I'd move to another part of the year to a different place, literally for climate reasons. But that has been completely turned on its head. It's not just retirees who are looking at the so-called swallow lifestyle. It goes far beyond that. And the reasons vary. The reasons could be work-related. So I could have offices in 2 locations across the globe, and I'd like to spend a part of the year and show presence in each office. It could be lifestyle reasons. I just like to be in different locations to experience the lifestyle of what these 2 locations have to offer. But the trend that's probably most on the increase right now is for family reasons, right? I mean, let's assume you have 2 kids and one is in New Zealand and the other is in the US, as an example. You want to spend time with the both of them, and maybe this ties in with your work location or your work plans, and that's how you see people trying to build up a life in 2 different locations. So purchase assets and essentially have a home in 2 different places. So that's the swallow lifestyle and what we're seeing on the increase right now.
That does invite some complexity though, Brandon. If you just think about having 2 residences, 2, kind of places of business, technically, would that have any tax consequence and implications that we need to think about?
Absolutely, Famida. Tax is always an important consideration, and especially in this case where we're talking about occupying 2 different jurisdictions. So in South Africa, we've been operating on a residence-based tax system since 2001. So questions like whether you're ordinarily a resident in South Africa, commonly we say you'll return from your wanderings. And of course, the physical presence test, where you actually start counting the number of days you've spent in the country and out of the country, etc. So if you're resident in South Africa, you will be liable for tax on your worldwide receipts and accruals. And in a case like this, where you have a foreign jurisdiction to consider as well, I would strongly advise speaking to a tax consultant, an experienced, skilled tax consultant who specifically deals with matters of an international nature.
Absolutely. I think that's a crucial point. The thing that most of our investors don't recognize is the point that you've just made is you've got to speak to somebody that is skilled, in the jurisdiction that you will be at any point in time. So it's important to have some kind of international advisor or certainly an advisor in that jurisdiction as well to help you from a tax perspective. So thank you, Brandon. I think that is critical. Other than tax, though, what are some of the considerations from a financial planning perspective do you think is important for clients to consider?
I suppose it goes back to 101, right? Let's start off with partnering with the financial advisor, because a move like this would have numerous factors to consider. So there would be transition costs involved, and you need to plan and invest towards that. And starting early would be great if you know this is coming up in the next 2, 3, 5 years. But it goes beyond the transition costs. You now need to factor in travel like you never have before, because essentially you have 2 homes or 2 bases that you'd be traveling between. And of course, purchasing assets in your, let me call it your new location, is another big cost that you need to consider. So all of these transition, asset purchase, and then your living costs are all conversations that you need to have with your financial advisor now, so that he or she can properly partner with you and plan toward it. rather than that being a surprise to your overall and holistic financial plan.
Of course, and something maybe directly or indirectly, following on from that topic is just the cost of living. I mean, we've seen a stagflationary environment locally. Certainly, I mean, internationally, even your developed market economies are sitting with, record levels of inflation. And, on a relative basis, the cost of living in South Africa is certainly a lot, I would imagine, palatable and a lot cheaper and lower than our counterparts overseas. Any words of wisdom there around, what clients can expect and how they can maybe hedge some of that risk?
Sure. So, I mean, cost of living has to be factored in and it has to be researched. So you need to do some homework in terms of the country that you're moving towards. Of course, there's an inflation rate associated to that country as well. And you need to understand that exchange rates will have an impact on those decisions to a large extent. But I think that the main things that you should be considering when considering cost of living would be the basics, the absolute essential. So housing becomes important, transportation becomes really important. I mean, healthcare is top of mind, of course, and we all gotta eat, right? So I mean, groceries would need to be considered as well. So I think those would be top of mind when you're doing your cost of living analysis, if I can call it that. And you're right, South Africa is far more palatable in terms of a cost of living versus some of our global counterparts. I mean, if we're talking about Switzerland or Hong Kong or Luxembourg or Monaco, suddenly we have, let's just say it's really expensive to live in those places.
And I think we get a new appreciation for the cost of energy and, as you pointed out, the cost of food. So Brandon, I mean, it sounds like a really complex, array of kind of topics that one would need to consider, and quite a lot, for any person to go through by themselves, other than the complexity, behind, just the financial planning and certainly the living arrangements and other practicalities that go with it. It seems to be quite an intimidating subject. Where can investors start?
Mm. So it can be intimidating, and I think some desktop research will not do you any harm. So I think that's a good place to start and get a feel of what you're looking at. You mentioned in the previous episode, I mean, having conversations with people who are already in a country or already abroad, I mean, that would be invaluable to you. But I think at the end of the day, relying on specialists in a certain field to partner with you on this journey would be crucial. So I'd go back to your financial advisor being the first point of call. You need to be able to know that you can afford this. You need to be able to see how it fits in your overall plan. And then we spoke about the tax consultant, right? So I'm going to call it the international tax consultant would be a crucial role player, because we need to understand where and how your taxes have a role to play. And just taking it one step further than that, I think potentially your estate planning could become complex depending on these two jurisdictions. So I think having someone who's experienced in terms of understanding the estate implications of what you're doing and where you're actually a resident and where your children are and how you want to pass things out. I think all of those need to be considered. So partner with experts, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Brandon, for joining us today. And thank you, audience. I think this was a great example of some of the interesting trends and certainly some of the things maybe some of you are thinking about. Thank you for partnering with Liberty. Hopefully you're enjoying the series. You're understanding that there's help out there, and that any dreams or goals are certainly not limited to any one geography, and we can see the world is becoming a smaller place. So thank you for joining us in the series. Really looking forward to the next episode with you, where we talk about another really interesting topic. And remember, Liberty is in it with you, going global together.